Chapter 2. Step out of overdrive. Tap into your natural resilience. Feelings come and go like clouds in a windy sky. Conscious breathing is my anchor. Thich Nhat Hanh. In March 2011, Antonio Horta Osorio, a young star in the finance world, was appointed to become the youngest of Britain's Big Five bank CEOs, heading Lloyds Banking Group. His arrival on the scene led to tremendous hope for Lloyds, which was facing a substantial number of problems. Antonio worked tirelessly, often logging marathon 90-hour weeks to turn the bank around. Everyone wants to be successful. What success looks like, of course, is up to you. A rock star? A skilled dancer? A fabulous cook? A celebrity personal trainer? CEO of your own company? Or the best parent of your children? The point is, we all want to live at our full potential. When it comes to our goals, dreams, and aspirations, no one wants to be below average. And one of the things we've learned is that we need to have drive. Drive, ambition, motivation, go-getterness, hunger. Call it what you want. Whether we find it in our employees, our family members, or ourselves, we think of drive as a highly desirable trait. We are constantly trying to do more and be better, advance in our professions, lose weight, make more money, increase our athleticism, become perfect parents. Drive is a positive thing, in doses. The problem is that we are living in overdrive, and both science and our own personal experiences are showing us that we are paying a high price for it: chronic stress. Stress can be defined as having to face an enormous challenge while feeling that you have too few resources to meet that challenge. Historically, humans have lived under enormous challenges: famine, wars, disease, natural disasters, and high infant mortality were mainstays for centuries. Today, however, most of us no longer have to contend with these stressors. However, our stress levels remain extraordinarily high. According to the American Institute of Stress, a survey taken from a representative sample of Americans in 2014 shows these statistics. Annual stress-related healthcare costs for employers, $300 billion. Percent of people who regularly experience physical costs caused by stress, 77. Percent of people who regularly experience psychological costs of stress, 73. Percent of people who report lying awake at night due to stress, 48. Given that these statistics come from 2014, a time when most Americans lived in relatively safe environments and had basic needs, food and shelter, taken care of, the numbers are alarming. What is more, 48% felt that their stress had increased over the past 5 years, suggesting that stress levels are on the rise. 8 months after Antonio Horta Osorio took on the high-power, high-pressure CEO position at Lloyds, he took a medical leave of absence due to extreme stress and fatigue. His stress was so high that he was unable to sleep for 5 days running. When the news of his leave of absence hit, Lloyds lost £1 billion in market value. As in Antonio Horta Osorio's case, overdrive can ironically backfire and prevent us from achieving our goals. We have come to accept that we can't succeed without living in overdrive, that we can't succeed without stress. Yet we are mistaken. Research shows that stress actually stops us from being as successful as we could be. There is a better way: fostering resilience. Why we equate success with stress. Where do we get this notion that stress is both an essential requirement for and an inevitable byproduct of success? Our culture idealizes professions that involve high pressure, from TV shows about emergency room doctors working in the most intense situations, and busy lawyers running from case to case, to books and articles celebrating extraordinary CEOs and entrepreneurs who run major companies, volunteering on boards for charitable causes, and still managing to help their kids with homework. Our culture also values persevering to attain our goals and fighting to outperform others, all of which involve some form of stress. The idea of being a go-getter involves straining, pushing, and competing. When people successfully complete a project, reach a goal, or master a feat, the slang expressions to congratulate them are, "You killed it," or "You destroyed it." Forcefulness is part of our understanding of success. As a consequence, we value intensity, which inherently involves physiological stress. In fact, success is popularly equated with aggressiveness. Research I conducted at Stanford with psychology professor Jeannie Tsai shows that in the United States, when we are in a situation in which we want to influence others, we value high-intensity positive emotions like excitement, as opposed to low-intensity emotions like calm. Why? Because we believe such emotions will make us more influential. In a study in which we assigned participants to be either leaders or followers, we found that those in leadership roles automatically wanted to feel more high-intensity, positive emotions. However, emotions like excitement, despite being positive, activate our physiology's stress response due to their intensity. In other words, even the positive emotions that we want to feel in order to be successful are inherently stress-inducing and taxing on the body. The idea that stress and success are inevitably intertwined has become so ingrained in our culture and work habits that we take pride in our stress levels. We brag about how much we have on our plates or the length of our to-do lists. We boast about the craziness of our schedules. We advertise how little sleep we've gotten and that we haven't taken a vacation in years. We may not like to feel stressed, but we wear it like a badge of honor. We seem to think that the more stress we experience and hopefully endure, the more successful we will be. Science shows that this drive and stress theory of success, though so widely accepted, backfires in the long run. Stress in small doses or spurts can help us perform at our best and might even help us achieve a short-term goal. Because of this positive effect, many people feel that stress has worked for them in the past, and therefore they conclude it's necessary all the time. However, over time, chronic stress is the number one enemy of success. It depletes us and weakens the cognitive skills we most need. As we saw in the story of Antonio Horta Osorio, far from helping us accomplish more, it can be a major obstacle. Good stress, bad stress, and success. Stress is not all bad, of course. Short-term stress serves the purpose of fueling us. Think of the adrenaline rush that gets you across the road quickly when you see an oncoming car. A little momentary stress can also be good for your health. In a series of landmark studies, Firdos Debar, a colleague and professor of psychiatry at Stanford University, discovered that stress can provide great physiological and psychological benefits, including enhanced immunity. He was the first to suggest that the biology of a short-term stress response could be harnessed to increase protection and performance. In a well-cited and groundbreaking study, Firdos demonstrated the potentially protective effects of short-term stress and the harmful effects of chronic stress. Right before I underwent gallbladder surgery, Firdos reminded me that my stress response would help in the healing process by strengthening the immune system, provided I kept my stress levels low before the surgery. As shown in a study from his research group, surgery triggers a stress response, flooding the body with chemicals to hasten healing. However, if I entered surgery chronically stressed, my immune response would actually be weaker because I would have already diminished my body's resources. I ended up attending a 2-day silent meditation retreat immediately before the surgery and healed very well. Short-term stress can provide additional benefits. For example, short-term stress can lead to better mental and physical performance, especially when an individual is skilled in the task at hand. For instance, public speaking, a bicycle race, or a musical performance. However, this is the case only if the individual is not suffering from chronic stress. The Yerkes-Dodson law, named after the two researchers who discovered it, stipulates that, like an inverted U-shaped curve, a certain level of stress helps us perform better, but once it gets too high, it actually gets in our way. For example, if you are adept at giving professional presentations, a little stress may help you do great, whereas too much impedes your performance. Other studies show that in some situations, stress can facilitate bonding, creating a support system around you. Acute stress can increase cooperative, social, and friendly behavior. This positive social response could help explain the human connection that occurs during crises or natural catastrophes. Think about New York City after 9/11. This connection may be partly responsible for our collective survival as a species. But we can have too much of a good thing. You have probably read about the negative effects of chronic stress. Stress in large quantities and over long periods will damage your health, your relationships, and your work. And as we saw with Antonio Horta Osorio of Lloyd's Banking Group, it can have a dramatic effect on the performance and ultimately the success of the organization for which you work. Scientific research overwhelmingly shows that chronic stress makes you more prone to illness and inflammation, and even accelerates cellular aging. It can also decrease productivity by impairing your cognitive abilities. Have you found that you have problems remembering things under high stress? Stress maintained over long periods harms your memory in particular, but also your ability to be creative, to see situations clearly, to think outside the box, to problem solve skillfully, and to make good decisions. There's even evidence that chronic stress makes you a terrible manager and leader. Stress has a ripple effect, increasing the stress of those around you. Anxious emotions, such as fear, are physiologically contagious through pheromones, chemicals released in our sweat. When someone emits fear pheromones, the people who come into contact with that person show greater activation in brain areas corresponding to anxiety and fear, particularly the amygdala. And we don't need research to tell us that when we bring stress home to our families, the results are equally disastrous. Since not all stress is bad, the trick is to harness the benefits of short-term stress while not falling prey to chronic stress. In other words, sustainable long-term success is not about burning the candle at both ends. It is about learning to skillfully surf the stress wave. And even though intense stress can knock us out, we can also recover from its depleting effect. To do that, we turn to resilience, our ability to quickly recover from stressful situations or setbacks, which is fortunately as natural to our physiology as the stress response. Can we be buoyant, no matter how rough the waters? Can we find the drive and energy to accomplish our goals without the exhaustion and anxiety of chronic stress? The answer is yes. However, while most people know very well how to get stressed, fewer know how to tap into their own built-in reservoir of resilience. The good news is that you can easily learn to do so. Our natural resilience. Resilience is the ability to quickly bounce back from the stressful situations you face every day. A difficult interaction with someone, a delayed flight that threatens to make you late for an important sales call, working long hours on a project with a looming deadline, and so on. We have all learned about the fight or flight response, where our bodies, in fact the bodies of most animals, prepare to either fight off a potentially deadly attack or run away. However, what most of us have not learned is what happens after the threat has passed and our bodies return to their normal state. The rest and digest response. Consider a lion chasing an antelope in the wild, with the antelope in flight mode, sympathetic nervous system fully activated, and adrenaline pumping. If the lion catches her, her life ends right there. But if she escapes, once out of harm's way, the antelope's stress is over almost immediately. The parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for resting and digesting, will kick in, and she will peacefully relax and return to grazing in the sun. The fight or flight state has placed tremendous demands on her physiology, but as soon as it is deactivated, she can focus on recovering and regaining her full strength. Within minutes, therefore, her nervous system has calmed down to allow her to regain an optimal state in which she can restore her resources and energy. The key to her resilience is her ability to quickly return to the restorative rest and digest state, to remain in that state until an extreme life-threatening situation taxes her again, to overcome the next challenge at full strength. Animals running for their lives in the wild are not the only ones that experience remarkable resilience in the face of a threat or stress. Take your dog to the veterinarian, and you'll notice a huge stress response. He might start shaking, lowering his ears, and pulling on the leash to resist going into the exam room. However, that stress response subsides quickly once the exam is over and your pet is back in the comfort and familiarity of your home. You can even observe resilience in kids. Children who go through a stressful episode, such as a first day of school, bounce back immediately. They may be emotional while they say goodbye to their parents, but the emotions often last minutes, and soon they are smiling again. The fact that children and animals recover so quickly from stress shows just how naturally resilient our nervous system is. We are meant to return to a state of well-being quickly and effortlessly. So why is it that as adults, we often seem to have a hard time handling stress and bouncing back? We have somehow lost our natural resilience. Think about it. How quickly do you bounce back from frustrations, stressful episodes, and disagreements? 5 minutes? An hour? 1 day? 5 days? Do you still feel stresses pinch at the very thought of them? We can receive one disturbing call and feel angry all day about it, maybe even all week or month. Many people go to their graves harboring anger from an event that happened decades ago. Many adults, it seems, have simply forgotten how to tap into their natural resilience. There are a couple of reasons for this phenomenon. First, there are biological reasons why we still worry even when we don't have threats looming over us. Second, resilience is neglected in our current culture. Resilience saboteurs. What prevents adults from enjoying the resilience children and even animals seem to tap into so easily? Why does our stress linger so much longer than theirs, sometimes becoming chronic? The answer is in our brain. Our capacity for thought, as precious as it is, gets in our way. In addition to a fretful mind, popular messages encourage us to live in overdrive, making it all the more difficult for us to return to a calm state. Let's examine each of these resilience saboteurs. Our minds. We share many similar brain regions with animals. For example, regions responsible for sight, balance, and fear. Unlike most animals, however, we have an especially well-developed neocortex, which gives us the capacity to have an intellect and to reflect. Thank goodness for our neocortex. It is a beautiful gift that allows us to have insight, to develop language, to listen to this book, and to communicate thoughts, ideas, and feelings. Unfortunately, it also gives us the ability to worry, despair, perseverate, psychology lingo for rehash the same thing over and over again, imagine the worst, dramatize, and create fictitious scenarios and totally wild interpretations. If the antelope were graced with a neocortex like ours, she might not relax quite so fast after the stressful episode with the lion. Instead, she might replay the scenario in her mind over and over again, worry and plan escape scenarios in case the lion returns, develop insomnia, obsessing over the idea that the lion could potentially harm her baby, and so on. Does this sound familiar? Our brains tend to focus on negative thoughts more than positive ones. Scientists hypothesize that this negativity bias is evolutionarily adaptive. By remembering dangerous encounters with predators, for example, our ancestors were more likely to steer clear of them. However, nowadays this tendency is no longer necessary and often gets in our way. With just one or two negative thoughts, you can agitate your physiology to extremes. As Dr. Paul Gilbert, a British psychologist and founder of compassion-focused therapy, points out, it only takes a call from a frustrated boss, an angry text message from a romantic partner or friend, or even a curse from a stranger to immediately whip your entire physiological chemistry into an anxious state. And it's exhausting. Given the number of stressful situations we encounter and the angry or anxious thoughts they generate, this response can prevent us from resting and restoring ourselves. Even opening our inbox is enough to assail us with stressors. Research shows that the more you check your email, the more stress you experience. The reverse is also true. A study out of the University of California, Irvine, by Gloria Mark and U.S. Army researcher Armand Cadello, investigated the impact of email on work productivity and stress levels. When email was removed, participants in the study noticed an improved ability to focus on the task at hand. They also found that stress, as measured by heart rate, was lower without email. This should come as no surprise. Emails are stripped of social cues. Communication was undoubtedly more empathic and less stress-inducing before email. People talked on the phone or in person, allowing for greater adjustment of interactions based on social cues. For example, if someone looked visibly fatigued or unwell, their supervisor may not have been as hard on them. Sadly, those cues are not present with email, and immediate responses are often expected. All we receive is a written message whose tone is difficult to interpret. A short email from your boss might sound angry and make you nervous. An emotional email from your partner might completely upset your focus at work as you worry about what it might mean. An email disclosing new information about an impending legal matter can further increase your anxiety. How does it feel to receive dozens of such emails throughout the day? In our email-less past, we would experience maybe one highly emotional event a day, or 2 or 3 at the most. For example, a confrontation with a colleague, a spat with a spouse, or a phone call from an angry friend. In 2014, business users sent and received on average 121 emails a day, up from 105 in 2011, and expected to increase to 140 by 2018. As a consequence, 1 hour of email can take you through a huge range of emotions and stressors. Sure, you get emails that make you happy too, photos of your nephews, someone's marriage announcement. But unfortunately, we are more influenced by negative input because, as discussed earlier, the mind tends to focus on negative information. Is it any wonder that we come home feeling exhausted after a long day of doing nothing but sitting at our computer? External and internal stimuli. Not only do our minds constantly produce thoughts that agitate us, but our nervous systems are perpetually overstimulated by external messages. Buy more stuff, look better, exercise more, eat better, perform at a higher level, learn more. The messages we receive at school, at work, through advertising, and through cultural media like TV shows push us harder and harder, grossly overstimulating us and triggering stress responses. If you feel assailed, overwhelmed, or overstimulated by the many messages that come your way every day, there's a reason for that. Commercial and media organizations routinely employ stress-boosting techniques to capture our attention. As described earlier, our brain is wired to focus on fearful or negative stimuli more than positive ones. That's why messages designed to incite fear and anxiety permeate our culture. Anyone who wants to capture our attention knows how to assail us with these stressful stimuli. News agencies, for example, keep us hooked with negative headlines: war, conflict, death, destruction. Even special offers and sales, think about Black Friday, manipulate our adrenaline system to ensure that we respond. As a result, we live in a daily state of stress. No matter how aware we are of these messaging techniques, we all feel at least some of their stressful effects. To make matters worse, it's not just external messages that cause us stress. We ourselves play an active role in keeping our adrenaline levels high. To keep up with these cultural messages, we have learned how to activate our stress response daily. Although the stress response is meant for rare and life-threatening occasions, we call it up voluntarily. In fact, most people depend on it and use it just to meet the demands of the day. You may recognize that you purposefully call on it by overscheduling yourself, overcommitting, and waiting until the last minute to complete projects, because you depend on anxiety to fuel yourself. When you are tired and really need to rest, you may find that you instead choose to keep pushing or relying on stimulants like coffee, sugar, or energy drinks to give you the high you need to keep going. In fact, a growing trend shows that students and professionals are engaging in the dangerous, not to mention addictive, habit of popping stimulant drugs designed to treat attention deficit disorder so as to stay up and focus for longer hours. We have become hooked on the fast lane. Is it surprising then that when we come home at night, we're still buzzing from the day and can't relax and go to sleep? Overstimulated and unable to calm down, we turn to depressants like alcohol and sleeping pills or anti-anxiety medication to restore us. The constant back and forth between stimulant-induced anxiety and depressant-induced drowsiness further taxes our already exhausted nervous system. In sum, every day, our thoughts as well as external messages and stimulants sabotage our ability to tap into our natural resilience. We then routinely try to manage this stress in ways that not only are ineffective, but often make us even more anxious and depleted. Why stress management backfires. Through our education and professions, we learn all kinds of information, life tools, and discipline. But we never learn how to properly respond to stress and difficulty. Instead, we try to talk ourselves out of the emotion, tough it out, or reach for a drink. Research shows, however, that these approaches don't work and can even be destructive. You can't talk yourself out of stress. Studies show that the way we perceive a situation can help us regulate our emotions to some extent. But when we find ourselves in difficult situations, talking ourselves out of feeling stressed is extremely challenging, if not impossible. For example, if after going shopping you return to your car to find a $30 parking ticket, you might be able to soothe yourself and calm your initial anxiety about receiving a ticket with thoughts of how grateful you are that your car was not towed, or how happy you are that the designer suit you just bought was on sale, which made getting the ticket worth it. But if you return to your parking spot to find that your car has been impounded, you'll have to pay a $750 fine to recover it, and you're late for an important job interview, it might just take all the strength you have to not lose it right there and then. In a high-stress situation like this one, attempting to use thoughts to change your emotions is likely to be fruitless. Try to talk yourself into sleeping when you are anxious the night before a big interview or exam or performance. Better yet, think about how helpful it is when a friend or manager tells you to just relax when you are stressed. That's not only unhelpful, it's downright irritating. Have you ever wished to forget an argument with someone, only to find yourself rehashing it in your head for hours? Why is it so hard to control our mind, especially when we are stressed? Daniel Wegner, a psychology professor at Harvard University, has shown in several studies that the intention to control a particular thought often breaks down under stress or mental overload and actually ends up triggering the unwanted thought, undermining our best intentions. Wegner describes this as an ironic process. When we resist a certain thought or action, trying not to eat junk food when on a diet, or trying not to think of someone you just broke up with, our efforts can easily backfire under stress. Toughing it out doesn't work. When we feel anxious and can't talk our way out of stressful thoughts, we often end up suppressing emotions. We put on a poker face and suck it up. Research by Stanford psychologist James Gross demonstrates that attempting to suppress emotions by not showing our emotion leads to the opposite of what we want. By trying to hide emotions, we actually manifest them more strongly physiologically. For example, anger or stress increase the heart rate and make your palms sweat. Suppressing these emotions increases their physiological impact. In fact, it even impacts the physiology of whoever you are talking with by raising their heart level. Suppressing negative emotions on a regular basis actually makes people experience more negative emotions and less positive emotions. Individuals who tend to suppress have lower self-esteem, optimism, and well-being, and higher rates of depression as well as impaired memory. Suppression negatively impacts their relationships and social life. Chocolate and alcohol aren't any better. Instead of dealing with stress constructively, we often resort instead to compensatory substances like food, alcohol, and cigarettes, or distract ourselves by watching excessive TV, playing video games, or even working compulsively. However, the unhealthy habits we entertain in those moments often end up making us feel worse. Expressions like, "I need a drink," or "I need a smoke," have become so common that we even use them as a joke to refer to a rough situation we're in. Most of us have indulged in moments of weakness or exhaustion when the only thing we can think of to make us feel better is that extra sweet treat or glass of wine. And while they might give us a momentary feeling of relief, they obviously do not resolve the stress. And if resorted to often, they aggravate the stress of an already depleted nervous system. You probably know your own weaknesses, the compensatory substances or habits that you rely on to cope with stress, and you may even feel bad about them. But you shouldn't. It's natural to seek ways to soothe and regulate ourselves, and for good reason. We intuitively know that, like the antelope that reverts to a state of calm, we too can reset our systems and return to a place of balance. The only difference is that we are seeking to restore balance the wrong way, by trying to talk ourselves out of it, by suppressing our feelings, and by resorting to comfort food, drinks, and so on. We have so forgotten how to naturally return to a balanced state that Silicon Valley startups are creating wearable technologies designed to bring you back to a state of calm you down. Tapping into natural resilience. I work extensively with veterans who have suffered post-traumatic stress syndrome. In a particular session, one of the veterans told me, "I know I'm in the U.S., and there's no danger inside the shopping mall, but I still have to brace myself for 20 minutes before I can walk in." This example demonstrates how powerless our thinking mind can be when we're in a highly anxious state. Despite knowing intellectually that the mall is not dangerous, this veteran still needed to brace himself physically for a long time before he could enter. Altering his thoughts was not enough for him to cope with intense stress. And it often isn't enough for us either, especially when we are under chronic stress. If our thoughts and minds are not the best gateway to tap into resilience, what is? Our bodies. You have probably noticed that the state of your body affects your mind. Too much caffeine can make you feel anxious, and hunger can make you feel grumpy. Similarly, if you can bring greater relaxation and ease into your body, your mind will naturally be at its best and have the chance to reset from the stress. Think of how you feel after a massage, a hike in nature, or a warm bath. And yet, when we need immediate help to deal with a difficult situation, we can't usually run a bath or get a massage. So what is the fastest way to achieve well-being? It is so close to you that it can easily be overlooked. Your breath, a rapid and reliable pathway into your nervous system dedicated to helping you regain your optimal state. Even if you have an intuitive understanding that the breath can regulate the mind and emotions, you probably have told someone who is stressed to take a deep breath, you might not be fully aware of its power. Breathing is something we do every day, every moment. It's arguably the single most important action of our life. It is also the most neglected one, because it mostly happens on its own and below the level of our awareness. What makes breathing so unique is that it can happen automatically, like digestion and heartbeat, or it can be controlled through will. It is the one autonomic function you have a say over. Indian humanitarian and spiritual leader Sri Sri Ravi Shankar has spent much of his life teaching yoga-based breathing practices around the world through his organization, the Art of Living Foundation. He points out that our first act in this world is to take a deep breath in, and our last act will be taking a deep breath out. Breathing is life, yet we are typically not taught, at home or at school, about the importance of the breath and its impact on the mind and body. Observe how you breathe. There are different patterns that relate to different emotions. Just as your mind influences the breath, you can influence the state of your mind through the breath as well. Research supports Sri Sri's observations. A revealing study by Belgian psychologist Pierre Philippot shows that your emotions change your breathing. In Philippot's study, his colleagues measured people's breathing patterns when the participants felt emotions like sadness, fear, anger, and happiness. The research team found that each emotion was associated with a distinct way of breathing. When we experience anxiety, for example, we are likely to take rapid, shallow breaths. When we feel calm, we take deep, slow breaths. Laughter and sobbing are other examples of how the breath accompanies emotional states. When we come home from a long, exhausting day, we slump down onto the sofa and sigh. More interesting and revealing than Philippot's initial study was his follow-up study. The researchers invited a different group of participants to breathe in the patterns that corresponded to the various emotions from the first study. Then they asked the participants how they felt. Lo and behold, the participants started to feel the emotions that corresponded to the breathing patterns. In other words, when they took deep, slow breaths, the participants felt calm, and when they took rapid, shallow breaths, they felt anxious or angry. The finding that we can change how we feel by using our breath is revolutionary. Given that it is so difficult to change our emotions using thoughts, for instance, talking yourself out of intense anger or anxiety, learning to use the breath is a powerful and liberating tool for handling stress so we can perform at our best. One study found that just by giving participants the simple instruction to slow down their breath, researchers were able to reduce the anxiety felt by participants in a stressful decision-making situation. In a study I ran using a breathing intervention for veterans returning from Iraq and Afghanistan who were dealing with trauma, we found that the breathing practices significantly restored their resilience. I researched the benefits of Sri Sri Ravi Shankar's breathing technique, the Sudarshan Kriya, because I had heard of its benefits for stress and trauma. When they came into the study, many of the veteran participants suffered from acute anxiety and post-traumatic stress. After immersing themselves in an intensive week-long breathing program, however, their symptoms decreased significantly. They were able to relax, and the results were maintained 1 month and 1 year out, suggesting permanent improvement. Breathing is a tool that we have on hand all the time to help us in stressful situations, such as being stuck in traffic on the way to work. Below is an example of how breathing helped someone in arguably the most stressful type of commute there is, a military convoy in a war zone. The experience of Jake Dauberkey, a 26-year-old Marine Corps officer from Iowa, exemplifies the power of breathing to calm the mind. The war in Afghanistan was raging, and Jake was the officer in charge of the last vehicle in his convoy. The vehicle in question is called an MRAP, which stands for Mine-Resistant Armor-Protected Vehicle. As the convoy drove along, Jake's MRAP rolled over an improvised explosive device. There was an extremely loud blast, and despite its armor, the MRAP was damaged. As the vehicle came to a halt and the dust settled, Jake looked down and saw that his legs were severely fractured. He could see muscle and bone exposed where his pants were torn. In this incredibly traumatic moment, Jake remembered a breathing technique he had learned. He had read a book for active service members, On Combat, by Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, that described tactical breathing. This exercise involves breathing in and out in a pattern of 4-second counts and breath holds as a way to calm the adrenaline rush and fight or flight response. Remembering to breathe in this manner, Jake was able to keep his cool, to check on the well-being of his Marines, to ask his driver to send out a signal for help, to prop up his legs, to tourniquet them, and when all his responsibilities were met and he had ensured everyone's safety, to lie down and rest as he waited for help to arrive. It was only then that he lost consciousness. I was doing the breathing because I thought otherwise I was going to go into shock, Jake explained. Later on, I found out that given the amount of blood I was losing, if I had not had the calmness and presence of mind to tie the tourniquets, I would have bled out and died or fallen into a coma. I saw Jake about a year after he returned from Afghanistan. The lower half of his legs had had to be amputated. Although he says it hurts to even stand in his prosthetics, I was moved to see him get up and join his friends on the dance floor at my wedding. According to Stephen Porges, professor at the University of North Carolina and distinguished university scientist at Indiana University Bloomington, one reason slow breathing has an immediate effect is that it activates the vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve, which is linked to our heart, lungs, and digestive system, and thus slows down the sympathetic, fight or flight, and adrenal systems. In so doing, it rapidly calms us down. And with a calm mind, we handle situations more effectively. Porges explains that abdominal breathing, using the diaphragm, is particularly beneficial, as are lengthened exhales. Exhales slow the heart rate. The longer we spend on the out-breath, the more our nervous system relaxes. In this way, exhales activate our parasympathetic, rest and digest system, coaxing greater relaxation into our bodies and minds and helping us feel more peaceful. By controlling your breathing, you can use a voluntary mechanical behavior to make a profound change on your state of mind. So what does this mean for us? We can use our breath whenever we experience a stressful event. It is an incredible tool that is accessible to you anytime and anywhere, whether it is in an interview you are nervous about, an interaction that is upsetting, or a big public talk. Breath training to build resilience. While voluntarily changing your breath can help you calm down in a particular situation, the long-term effects of a daily breathing practice, just like those of a daily exercise routine, are even more pronounced. Preliminary studies have found that regularly practicing breathing exercises normalizes your level of cortisol, the stress hormone. As a regular practice, breathing can recondition your body to a state of greater calm, helping it bounce back from stress more quickly and perhaps reducing reactivity in the face of challenges. Similarly to a marathon runner who trains her body regularly as a prelude to running longer stretches, you can use daily breathing exercises to prepare your nervous system to be resilient in the face of stressful events, like a big meeting, interview, or first date, so that you perform at your best and recover more quickly thereafter. Breathing exercises may also naturally increase energy. On average, we only use 10 to 30% of our lung capacity. In other words, we are not performing at our peak energy level. Athletes, in contrast, have learned to use up to 100% of their lung capacity to improve endurance and stamina. While the resilience of adults' nervous systems usually decreases with age, this decline is less rapid in professional athletes and others who engage in intense cardiovascular activity, because they generally breathe slower. Yet another reason why cardiovascular exercise is a great stress reliever. It may seem paradoxical that breathing both decreases stress and increases energy. In our overcommitted, overstressed culture, we don't usually associate high energy with calm. And that misunderstanding explains why we feel we need stress to get things done. A University of Wisconsin-Madison student who participated in a breathing workshop I conducted told me that since learning breathing and meditation, he was feeling so calm and blissful that he was seriously concerned he would lose his edge. He worked with the U.S. Marshals and was understandably worried that he would lose his alertness because he was so relaxed, with potentially life and death consequences. Because of the widely held notion that stress is essential to success, it's natural to worry that being relaxed and letting go of tension might affect performance. However, having a calmer state of mind, rather than a stressed one, will help us respond to any situation more rationally and thoughtfully. When we are stressed, we often make rash and impulsive decisions, react too quickly, and say or do things we may later regret. Moreover, our sympathetic, fight or flight, nervous system does not shut off, and we exhaust ourselves rapidly. If you strengthen your resilience, you will still be able to respond effectively to life's challenges and experience enough good stress to perform at your best as circumstances require, but without paying the cost. Finally, breathing exercises allow your sympathetic nervous system to rest when it is not needed. They help you relax faster and sleep better after you get home from work. Because you unwind fully during rest periods, you recover your body's natural resilience and are able to meet life's challenges with poise. It allows you to function at peak energy, yet without the physical and psychological costs of anxiety and adrenaline overload. In other words, being calm and energized is not only possible through the breath, but it is also the ideal state. When you are facing a social, creative, or professional endeavor, being highly alert yet also peaceful helps you think, work, and communicate more clearly. You can perform with heightened energy, but also come home at the end of the day and relax naturally. The body, unaffected by external stimulants or depressants, is then able to regain its resilience and bounce back from the dozens of small, stressful events you experience every day. Putting it into practice. If you have a fast-paced life, slowing down may seem like a challenge. We're so used to running around and being addicted to the speed of life that making this shift to a slower gear seems downright foreign. However, you can learn to tap into your natural resilience. Consciously make time for calming activities. They are vital to your nervous system and well-being. Schedule them into your other top priorities, like taking a shower or brushing your teeth. We usually emphasize habits that make us look and feel good on the outside, grooming ourselves, putting on makeup, showering, and so on, but forget to do the same for what makes us feel good on the inside. When you slow down, you may experience anxiety because you're so used to operating at a faster pace. This is normal. Just go with it. A few years after returning to the United States, Jake Dauberkey participated in a breathing workshop for veterans after hearing about my research study. Breathing helped him relax his racing mind, but he also found that as he relaxed, painful memories of his accident resurfaced. By sticking to the breathing program, however, he was able to move past this old trauma and anxiety. It's been a life-enhancing process that has helped me continue to move forward, he says. Retraining your nervous system doesn't happen in a day, especially if you've been living at high velocity for a while. The good news, however, is that it is possible to retrain your physiology and nervous system. Here are a few ways you can start. Take a breath. At first, it may seem silly to do breathing exercises. It may even seem boring. But you'll notice the effects immediately. Here are some strategies to help you get started. Your breath is with you all the time. It's the most accessible tool you have, and it's invisible. You can practice breathing for well-being no matter where you are without anyone noticing. At a board meeting that is getting contentious, or when your child is throwing a temper tantrum in the back seat, or when you're exhausted and still have hours of work ahead. Take a breather. The most basic way to develop a relationship with your breath is to take a few minutes each day to close your eyes and bring your total attention to your breath. Notice whether it is fast or slow, deep or shallow. Soon enough, thanks to this practice, you will begin to notice that your breathing shifts with your feelings and emotions during the day. For example, you will naturally take a deep breath during challenging times, or find that your breath quickens with anxiety or anger. As you become more aware of your breath, you'll also start to gain more control over it and your feelings in the moment. Thanks to that awareness, when you feel fear coming on, for example, you may notice your breath speeding up and becoming shallower. At that point, you can consciously slow it down and breathe into your abdomen to relax. With practice, you will know how to take deep and slow belly breaths whenever you encounter a challenging situation. Here is a simple technique you can practice daily or during difficult situations. Alternate nostril breathing. This gentle yoga-based breathing exercise can help cool the mind and emotions. You may notice that at any given time, one nostril is dominant. That is, air flows more smoothly through one nostril and only partially through the other. The dominant nostril alternates throughout the day. One of the reasons this exercise, alternate nostril breathing, may have calming and balancing effects on the mind is that this exercise can unblock both nostrils and allow for greater airflow. To practice, follow these steps. 1. Place the index and middle finger of the right hand between the eyebrows, the thumb on the right nostril, and the ring finger and pinky on the left nostril. The left hand rests on your lap, palm facing up. 2. Take a deep breath in and, closing the right nostril with your thumb, breathe out through the left nostril. 3. Then take a deep breath in through the left nostril. Close the left nostril with your ring finger and pinky at the end of the inhale, and exhale through the right nostril. 4. Take a deep breath in through the right nostril and, closing the right nostril with the thumb, exhale on the left side. Then start over. Do this with your eyes closed for about 5 minutes. Notice the effects on your body and mind. Yogic breathing practices present little or no risk to a healthy individual, though practitioners may occasionally feel initial tiredness or fatigue, transient tingling sensations, lightheadedness, or feelings of euphoria or dysphoria. It is always advisable to work with a trained and certified instructor. Ease into your body. Although I highly recommend breathing practices as a daily routine, there are also other ways to balance your nervous system. You probably have your own favorite activities that restore your energy and calm the mind, such as swimming or yoga, walks with your dog in nature, or cuddling with your child. These activities slow down your thoughts and bring ease to your body and nervous system. Here are some examples. Go for a walk. Studies have shown that a simple walk in nature, as opposed to an urban environment, can significantly decrease anxiety, preserve positive mood, and even improve memory. This benefit is not restricted to country dwellers alone. If you live in a city, choose a park or a tree-lined street. Even just looking at photographs of greenery for 40 seconds can give you a boost and increase your attention levels. Moreover, nature can inspire an experience of awe at the view of a landscape. Research on awe, which is often inspired by beautiful natural sceneries like a starlit sky or a vast horizon, suggests that it slows our perception of time, which is the opposite of what happens with stress, by bringing us into the present moment, and thereby enhances well-being and decreases stress. Take care of your body. As a result of our distracted lifestyle, we often don't listen to our bodies, or, as we've discussed in this chapter, we try to compensate for the stress we feel with habits that harm our health. We eat the wrong foods, drink, stay up too late, and forget to exercise, or we over-exercise. We forget that physical well-being influences mental and emotional well-being. We don't realize that the way we treat our bodies influences our stress levels and determines whether we are able to tap into our natural resilience. As anyone who has started a healthy diet or exercise regimen knows, when we start to take care of the body, we naturally feel better, and with a positive state of mind, our whole outlook on life changes. Engage in slow-paced activities. If running is your way to relieve stress, as healthy as that is, try also including slower-paced exercise into your schedule. Look for activities that don't involve too much intensity and strain. If you usually go for an intense hot yoga or a power yoga class, instead try yin yoga or restorative yoga or tai chi. Select an activity that is deliberately slow and doesn't involve much effort. Hug a loved one. Although it often seems that our schedules are too busy for spending time with friends or family, other than a quick catch-up call in the car on the way to work, it's worth it to carve out opportunities to be in the presence of loved ones and share physical affection. One study even showed that hugs are associated with lower stress and stress-related health problems. Whether you opt for breathing classes or other soothing activities, these practices all build upon themselves. Just like going to the gym, it takes repetition and daily commitment before you see a shift in your nervous system. Although no one expected Antonio Horta Osorio to return after his 10-week medical leave, he did. Not only did he surprise everyone by returning, but he also continued to turn Lloyd's Bank around, and the bank resumed paying dividends to its shareholders for the first time since 2008. Even when chronic stress is wearing us out, we can bounce back. Athletes put their bodies under stress at each training session and competition, but they are only as successful as the speed at which they recover physiologically. Your daily stresses may be different from those of an athlete, but the concept is the same. Your success is determined by the speed of your recovery. By tapping into your natural resilience through breathing and other calming exercises that activate the rest and digest part of your nervous system, you can learn to reduce stress and accomplish more than you ever thought possible. Chapter 3. Manage your energy. The hidden benefits of calm. Energy, not time, is the fundamental currency of high performance. Jim Lohr and Tony Schwartz, The Power of Full Engagement. Moving slowly, then fast, the two opponents wrap their limbs around each other. The only sound in the room is the thump of their bodies as they move around the mat as one. No wonder the practice sessions are referred to as rolling. In jiu-jitsu, the Brazilian martial art derived from judo, most of the action takes place on the floor. Jiu-jitsu became popular during an Ultimate Fighter Championship tournament, a mixed martial arts event in which, in its original form, competitors would fight any weight class multiple times a day, in any style, with few rules. Royce Gracie, Brazilian jiu-jitsu legend who first introduced this fighting style to the championships in 1993, is considered one of the most influential fighters in the history of mixed martial arts, after winning successive tournaments and defeating men who were much bigger and stronger than himself. Weight is usually an advantage in martial arts. Gracie demonstrated that it doesn't have to matter as long as you have skill. Mike Heitman, a police officer who works night shifts in some of the most dangerous areas of Southern California and is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, explained this counterintuitive idea to me. I met Mike when he came to a breathing and meditation class I taught for veterans. Mike is also a U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran who fought as an infantryman in Fallujah, one of the most deadly battles of the Iraq War. The deep relaxation he experienced in class prompted him to share the secret to succeeding in jiu-jitsu: energy management. In a fight, straining and exerting yourself only exhausts you. You lose your cool and make mistakes. You burn out, and your opponent defeats you. By instead remaining calm, you conserve your energy and can intuit the best way to make your next move. To win a jiu-jitsu match, the key is not to fight hard, but to let go. Not to rev yourself up, but to release all strain and stress. Ironically, victory comes when you stop struggling. All too often in our culture, we believe that, like the traditional fighter who exerts himself in an effort to overcome his opponent with brute force, we can be successful only by straining. We have to give our all every minute of the day, exerting all the intensity we can muster and relying on our iron will to help push us through the work and our fears. But like the traditional fighter, we often end up exhausted and burned out. The intensity we pour into our work and lives comes at a high cost: burnout. Psychologists define professional burnout as feeling drained and emotionally exhausted. You may even experience depersonalization, alienation from yourself. As a result, you are not yourself, and you are unable to accomplish work to the usual extent. Across professional fields, we are reaching high levels of burnout. Human service professionals like teachers, healthcare workers, and social workers are especially susceptible to burnout. For example, 45% of physicians in the United States are considered burned out. Financial professionals also experience high levels of burnout. 50 to 80% of bankers worldwide are completely burned out. In the United States alone, 60% of male bankers and 70% of female bankers are burned out. In the nonprofit sector, 45% of young employees insist that their next job will not be in the nonprofit sector, citing burnout as one of the 2 reasons they won't stay. Maybe you have felt some signs of it yourself. You are exhausted at the end of the day. You have tense shoulders, a tight jaw. You grind your teeth. Perhaps you have experienced some of the burnout symptoms outlined by the Mayo Clinic. Becoming cynical or critical at work, dragging yourself to work and having a hard time motivating yourself once there, becoming irritable or impatient with colleagues or clients, lacking the energy needed to be productive, lacking satisfaction when you achieve something, feeling disillusioned about your work. Our intensity is not the only reason we experience burnout at work. Other factors, such as lack of challenge, variety, or agency, also play a role. However, whereas you cannot always control these other factors, the one thing you do have a say over is how you spend your energy. As Mike explained, when you put all your energy into the fight, you wear yourself out and eventually lose. The person who ends up winning is the one who has remained cool under pressure and saved his energy, deploying it consciously and deliberately when he most needs it. Calmness, it turns out, is the key to better energy management. Cultivating calmness keeps you happy and helps you consistently achieve your goals, doing your best work without exhaustion. Let's first look at what we are actually spending our energy on. The cost of intensity. Why are we always exhausted at the end of a workday? Why do we come home wiped out with barely enough energy to make dinner before collapsing for the night? Normally, when we think about being tired, we think of physical reasons, lack of sleep, intense exercise, or long days of physical labor. Elliot Berkman, professor of psychology at the University of Oregon, points out that in our day and age, when few of us have physically demanding jobs, we are wiping ourselves out through psychological factors. After all, the physical effort we exert in our day jobs does not warrant the fatigue we experience when we get home. Does your body get tired until you really can't do anything at all? Asks Berkman. Actually, it would take a long time to get to that point of complete physical exhaustion. If you are a construction worker, a farmer toiling in a field, or a medical resident, working both day and night shifts, then yes, physical exhaustion might be the reason for your fatigue. But otherwise, Berkman points out, your fatigue is mostly psychological. I don't mean that the fatigue is just in your head, although, as I'll explain later, to some degree it is. I mean that you feel tired because the following 3 psychological factors drain you: high-intensity emotions, self-control, and high-intensity negative thoughts. High-intensity emotions. Psychologists distinguish emotions along 2 dimensions: positive-negative on the one hand, and high-intensity, low-intensity on the other. In other words, is the emotion positive, like elated, serene, or negative, like angry, sad? And is it high-intensity, like elated, angry, or low-intensity, like serene, sad? Research shows that we, especially Westerners and Americans in particular, thrive on high-intensity positive emotions. Research by Jeannie Tsai of Stanford University, with whom I conducted several studies, shows that when you ask Americans how they would ideally like to feel, they are more likely to cite high-intensity positive emotions, like elated and euphoric, than low-intensity positive emotions, like relaxed or content. In other words, Americans equate happiness with high intensity. East Asian cultures, on the other hand, value low-intensity positive emotions like serenity and peacefulness. When Jeannie and I ran a study to figure out why Americans value high-intensity positive emotions, we found that Americans believe they need high-intensity emotions to succeed, especially to lead or influence. In a study we ran, for example, people wanted to feel high-intensity positive emotions like excitement when they were in a role that involved leading or trying to influence another person. This intensity is reflected in the language we use to discuss achievement goals. We get fired up, pumped, or amped up so that we can bowl people over, crush projects, or crank out presentations. These expressions all imply that we need to be in some kind of intense attack mode. Go get it, knock it out of the park, and muscle through. The problem, however, is that high-intensity emotions are physiologically taxing. Excitement, even when it is fun, involves what psychologists call physiological arousal, activation of our sympathetic, fight-or-flight system. High-intensity positive emotions involve the same physiological arousal as high-intensity negative emotions, like anxiety or anger. Our heart rate increases, our sweat glands activate, and we startle easily. Because it activates the body's stress response, excitement can deplete our system when sustained over longer periods. In other words, high intensity, whether it's from negative states like anxiety or positive states like excitement, similarly taxes the body. High-intensity emotions are also mentally taxing. It's hard to focus when we're physiologically aroused and overstimulated. We know from brain imaging research that when we're feeling intense emotions, the amygdala is activated. We need to use effort and emotion regulation strategies from a different part of our brain, located in the prefrontal cortex, to calm ourselves enough to get our work done. And this emotion regulation itself requires effort, as I'll explain later. The result? You tire easily. Whether you're getting amped up with anxiety or with excitement to finish a project on a deadline, you are draining yourself of your most important resource: energy. Excitement, of course, can be a positive emotion, and it certainly feels a lot better than stress. But just as a sugar high may feel great for a while, it sends your body into a physiological high that can end with a crash. You are bound to feel tired sooner than if you had remained in a calm state. Self-control. Self-control, the discipline to stick to your goals in the face of distractions, is the second way we mismanage energy, thereby unnecessarily fatiguing ourselves. Whether you call it willpower, grit, or self-mastery, it is the mental determination to get the job done despite your feelings, the lure of alternative attractions, and hardships you have to endure. It is critical to success. "I can resist everything except temptation," said Oscar Wilde. Many of us can identify with his words. It's no surprise that across 50 countries, people consistently selected self-control as the trait they thought they had least of. We tend to exert the most self-control when we are at work. Think of how strong the temptation is to give your boss or colleagues a piece of your mind when they criticize your efforts, to sleep rather than put extra work into a document due the next morning, or to answer a personal email instead of returning a colleague's call. Our urge to respond to digital distractions in particular is strong. In a classic psychology experiment you have probably heard of, Pavlov noticed that after getting a dog used to being fed whenever a bell rang, the dog started to salivate at the sound of the bell. This reaction, called classical conditioning, is what happens to us when we see a new email pop into our inbox or hear the chime marking the arrival of a new text message. We get a rush. Research shows that we have a natural inclination to shift attention to things that are novel and new. It's far more exciting to check the contents of a brand new message than to work on the same old daily tasks. All day long we try, some days more successfully than others, to inhibit these urges and stay on task when we are at work. And this self-control is deeply exhausting. It depletes our energies in 4 ways. Controlling your impulses. Staying on task as opposed to giving up or giving way to distractions, checking Facebook, or temptations, leaving work early to meet friends. Controlling your performance. Persisting and giving your best despite having worked an 80-hour week on little sleep. Controlling your behavior, especially your emotional expressions. Maintaining a professional tone and demeanor even when the work atmosphere is hostile and your colleagues or managers make decisions you do not agree with. Controlling your thoughts. Focusing on your work despite the many thoughts that pop into your mind. For example, I'm tired, I want to go home. Or, maybe I should just quit my job. Or, I wonder if my significant other is upset about what I said. Or fantasizing about your next vacation. Given how many aspects of behavior, thoughts, and feelings you have to control, is it really a surprise that you are exhausted by the end of the day? Roy Baumeister, Florida State University professor and world expert on self-control, has demonstrated repeatedly that exerting self-control requires great effort. He compares self-comfort to a muscle, which can strengthen but also wear out with time. After a while, it gets tired and weakens. Ironically, self-control, when overly exerted, is so taxing that it backfires and leads to its opposite, complete lack of control. If you've ever started a diet or exercise regimen or observed some other resolution on New Year's Day, you know how difficult it can be to keep up. All too often, our efforts fail, and we end up binging and eating even worse than we had before we started. In a series of studies looking at a range of scenarios, Baumeister showed that when participants exerted self-control during the first exercise of a study, they were more likely to be impulsive and to lack self-control in the next exercise, showing signs of what appeared to be self-control fatigue, or as he coined it, ego depletion. These studies led Baumeister to argue that self-control is a limited resource. For example, in one study, the researchers baked chocolate chip cookies, filling their lab with a delicious aroma. They then brought in the participants. Some participants were invited to eat the chocolate chip cookies and a bowl of chocolates laid out before them. Others were told to eat the radishes that were displayed next to the tempting cookies and chocolates. Then they were given an exercise, working on a puzzle that was, unbeknownst to them, unsolvable. Researchers found that participants who had had to exert self-control by eating radishes instead of the tempting cookies and chocolates more quickly gave up trying to solve the puzzle than those who had eaten the chocolates, or a control group that had not been shown the chocolates or radishes. In another experiment, half the participants were asked to argue in favor of something that they opposed, student tuition raises, whereas the other half did not have to do this part of the exercise. Both sets of participants were then given the unsolvable puzzles to work on. Again, the participants who had argued in favor of something they were against gave up working on the puzzles more quickly. Whenever self-control is exerted, whether in the case of sensory pleasures like eating chocolate or personal beliefs, it weakens the more you use it. Since Baumeister first showed this effect, over 200 studies have confirmed his findings, further reinforcing the idea that self-control fatigues over time.
This is the end of the disc. The audiobook continues on the next disc.